Hi, good morning. I'm Bob Brooks, and I thought maybe it was an opportunity to touch base with you and kind of see who your professor is for Business 330. And I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about some of the upcoming subjects that you're going to be reading about. I hope you're enjoying the course so far. It's about to get a little bit more difficult as we get into the next couple of chapters, 8 and 9. I wanted to mention too that I know you've probably already noticed that you didn't have to read chapter 7. Chapter 7 is one of those chapters that gets a little more detailed into kind of accounting and financial things that probably the executive director or the CEO doesn't need to know in that great a detail. But I would like to tell you that it wouldn't be a bad idea, maybe after you're completed with the course, or if you ever have an opportunity to take a look through chapter 7 and look at some of the subjects that are covered in that chapter. It wouldn't be a bad idea. For example, while you wouldn't need to know how to do some of the techniques, just to familiarize yourself with those wouldn't be a bad idea. I think particularly for small churches and small nonprofits, some of the things that are important. One is a report they refer to in chapter 7 called a budget variance analysis. And that doesn't have to be something terribly sophisticated, but something that I always did every month was take a look at the variance between your proposed budget on a monthly basis, and in other words, what your expected expenditures were for the year to date and maybe during the month compared to what actuals have been. Because if that gets out of kilter, so often I find that nonprofits, particularly smaller ones, who are reliant upon donations, as those donations fluctuate, your revenue fluctuates enough that you really have to pay close attention to your expenditures to make sure you're in a good cash flow position. So some of those concepts are probably worth looking at. So to flip through that chapter 7 at some point wouldn't be a bad idea. A word about chapter 8. It covers the budgeting process. I feel now and always have that as a CEO or an executive director, the budget process is one of the more important things. The budget is important and the process is important. And the reason why you may not need to be familiar with and be able to do some of the techniques it talks about, such as a regression analysis, you may not need that level of detail in most of your nonprofits that you may be working with, but in order to steer your organization, that budget process is just really important. So, and I think particularly from the prospect that it gives you an opportunity at least once a year to sit down and really take a look at your departments, your ministries, and your functions and discuss how you've been doing from a historical perspective, what your successes and failures have been, what your goals are for the coming year, and then to set in place the financial resources to accomplish those goals. One of the more important things I think an ED or CEO does on an annual basis. The chapter also talks about a number of the types of budgets, the budget techniques, if you will, such as zero-based budgeting and program budgeting. I noticed it didn't mention performance budget, which is kind of a popular thing right now. I've never felt like the kind of budget or the budget technique is as important as the process, but there are some that fit with various organizations better than others, and so you may want to look at the kind of budget you're using and the technique you use, but I think as long as it's working for your organization, that's the main thing. Also, one of the things that many nonprofits, I believe, do not do well is a cash flow analysis, a liquidity level analysis. And particularly smaller organizations that don't have a lot of flex in their revenue stream or in their expenditures. In other words, they're living hand to mouth, if you will. It's important to watch those things very closely. There's some techniques in chapter 8 that will help you do that. So while again some of these techniques may be new, there may be some things that your nonprofit doesn't do. it's good to know how to do those, and so to keep you from getting overextended. The other thing that you'll see in the chapter, and I'm not big on debt unless it's necessary, and maybe particularly for capital resources. On the other hand, it's wise to have a relationship with a local bank and maybe a line of credit if you can get one, because when revenues don't come in and donations don't come in as you had expected for a month or so, it's nice to have that cushion of a line of credit. And that's why this whole course, finances, is so important, because even if you're short for a month or two and you need to go to a bank and get a loan, or even for capital expenditures, and you need to even sell bonds or something of that nature, having a good, solid financial reporting system in place is so important when you walk into a bank. So at any rate, a short line of credit can really save you as long as it's not abused. Chapter 9 gets into some fairly sophisticated subjects, and things like capital budgeting and long-range budgeting are probably more important for a growing organization, because you're the one that's going to need to plan for capital resources to meet the needs of your growth. It's something everyone should be familiar with, but probably more important for a growing organization. Some of the terms, such as net present value, return on invested capital, maybe some new terms for you, but it's something you're going to have to be familiar with at some point in your career, so this is a good time to learn them. And if you find some of those things in Chapter 9 a little challenging, I tell you, just be thankful that you don't have to read Chapter 10. Hey, I'm always here if you need me. You've got my phone number, my email address, and I hope you're getting something out of this course. The next couple of chapters are going to get a little more detailed as far as kind of accounting and true financial issues, but then it'll lighten up a little bit more, so hang in there. Thanks. Bye-bye.